Let's move conversation on to some transfer speculation that's been taking place across Europe. United, of course, this is looking at the summer.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to talk to you about potential of another striker with Hoyland. So this is a bit of a awkward position for United because do you sign a striker, someone like Osman, who wants to start every week? How can you take Hoyland, especially if it's a strong second half of the season? But even if he doesn't, he's been starting pretty much every game, and then say to him, you know what, your second season, you're not starting because you really
Yeah.
want to do the opposite. First season, we're going to gradually build you in, but second season, then you play more. Are you setting Hoyland back? So do you go out and get an experienced striker that's happy to play, as backup to Hoyland, or do you go out and get a top striker? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a decision that has to be made by whoever's the director of football in making a decision. Where are United at right now, and what are we actually trying to do? Because if they wanted to win titles this year, if they wanted to win trophies this season, then they should have bought Harry Kane last season. They should have done everything they could have to get Harry Kane last season. Does it make sense to buy someone like that now? I don't know. Moving ahead, when you're likely having players like Rafael Varane leave, Casemiro leave, Eriksen's probably going sometime soon. You're going through kind of what needs to happen where you really should be rebuilding. And for me personally, I don't. I would love to have Osimhen as striker. I think he's a fantastic player. He's young too. I mean, he's not like an old player either, so he's got many years ahead of him. Uh, but I don't see how it works with a player like Rasmus Højlund. I think it really depends on everywhere else, I guess. I think right now it would be better to have a player like Cavani, when we brought Cavani
Mhm.
in to work with this team, to work with these young players here who are inexperienced, and lead them and teach them and all of that. And I would buy a right winger, 1,000%. I would buy a right winger, and I would bring in more of like a veteran, type, like a Cavani type, someone in that mold to come in who was absolutely good enough to contribute, but doesn't need to start all the time and has a lot of, can teach them many things.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what you're going to do this summer because obviously they could sell Sancho,
Yeah.
they could sell Mason Greenwood, right?
Yep.
Potentially sell Anthony. I, Anthony might be tough, but you could bring in a lot of money or with
Yeah.
those couple of cents. Sancho might not help you with the FFP, but certainly, a Mason Greenwood sale will. However you feel about Mason Greenwood, he's obviously a very talented player
Yep.
and reputationally, a club in Spain could sign him. Whether he's at the level where Real Madrid would sign him, I don't know. There's not a lot of places you could go to outside of that. And if his reputation will survive him coming back to England, and I understand everyone has very strong emotions on this. Maybe there's a conversation inside United saying we keep him. I'm not saying they should or anything like that. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Mason, and how do you even base the transfer value on him. It's going to be very difficult. If you think about it, at one point United had Greenwood, Sancho, Anthony, and Rashford, and they've had problems with all four of them now.
Yeah.
Due to their own off-the-field issues, which has really got nothing to do with the manager. So it'll be interesting to see what United do. The other player United are quite heavily linked with at the minute is young Michael Olise at Palace. So he's supposed to leave at the end of the season. Uh, if Palace stay up, be interested to see what they do. He has been Palace's best player this season. Even better than Eze. Most man of the match, 5 goals, 1 assist. It's not Leighton, but Palace are not a great team to be fair.
Yeah.
Can play on the left or right. He was a United fan growing up. It's French. What do you think of Elise?
I think he's a fantastic player. I've highlighted him a few times in some of my own videos some months back. I know he's someone that's been on United's radar for quite a long time. He's a right winger. He's ready made. When you talk about the policy of, maybe not the policy, but the implication that was reported from a good reporter, Semi Mockbell in London, about Ineos wanting to get some players with Premier League experience. We talked about that because it makes the transition a little easier. Not all players, but some. He's a player I think who would come in right away and be successful and put that spot down. He has all the tools, all the talent. I think he's a fantastic player. I would love to see him come in. I think, if you had the options of him, Rashford, Garnacho on the wings, you have three players that have all proven they can contribute at a high level in the Premier League, and beat you in many different ways. He's a, I really like him. That's all I can say about it. I've watched a fair bit of him. I really like him. I think he'd be easily my top choice for who they bring in as a forward this summer. And he had a release clause about 35 million a few years ago. He did a new deal, signed, and it's somewhere around 50 million now. It's about as bargain as you can get to buy a player with that kind of fee, from England, who is a proven player. Comparables, you have a guy like Neto at Wolves, but he's had major injury issues. And so Elise has two, to be fair, but it's been a bit more recent for Neto, who's had a big injury this season. And you want to see how he returns from that and what happens. He's also been a player of interest, but yeah, but young Elise would be at the top of my list. His brother's at Chelsea, if I'm not mistaken. And that's the other options.
Chelsea probably don't even know that themselves.
Right. No, there's so many.
Oh.
But yeah, that's the other option. But I feel like there's a lot of indications. I've heard a lot about his personality. He's a bit of a character, from what I understand. It's like he's a very ambitious person. He's a very ambitious person. He thinks very highly of himself. I think a lot of times you have to be successful at this level. And I think he would love the challenge of playing for Manchester United, right? Personally.
Yeah, and there's players in that price range you can get a good value. I pointed out Joe Pedro at the weekend that I thought, really, really good signing for Brighton. Lastly, young Genk midfielder Bilal Al Kounas. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. My apologies if I've done that wrong. 19-year-old Belgian kid has a contract till 2027, 4 goals, 10 assists. Is a young player that lots of clubs around Europe are watching, and he would fit the profile of what United are looking for this summer.
Yeah, I can't say I know much about him. I know that, Arthur Vermeeren, who's just signed for Barcelona or Atletico, right? Was a player that United had watched before. And I think it would be really smart to pick up a player like that. With the age, you look in the midfield, McTominay is somebody that,
looking at a bit of Ericsson and stuff, where you fill some of those positions out with some young legs that are willing to sit in the bench, that they can grow into positions as well as obviously
exactly.
So because they've still got to find a solution to Mount and a couple of other players, but so I mean, he's a good young midfielder. I think you'd have enormous amount of decisions to make this summer. You've got the Rafael Varane situation, you've got the Casemiro situation, you've got the frontline situation, Wan-Bissaka, because I think they do need a right back. So you're talking about a centre back, you're talking about a right back. You're going to have to rejig that midfield, in my opinion, and you have to address the forward line. So there's a lot
to do.
You need to do this summer, which is another reason why I feel that with Ten Hag, the rope will be shorter, because the work that needs to get done this summer is not going to start in May. That's going to start once this deal gets approved in February. Then you'll start to see the whole structure fall in place of the director of football, the technical, all the stuff is still going to start taking shape. And then, of course, how United recruit will change dramatically, hopefully a lot more expeditiously and with a lot better information. One other quick story that made the headlines, sort of got lost over the weekend, was Igliotari, who said that the former Lazio director said that Manchester United had failed with a bid previously for Milinkovic-Savic in the price range of 85 million. Would have loved to have seen United a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. He was a player that every single year he was linked with him. And every year I heard, this is a real link, but it just never happened, He was somebody they thought that could replace Paul Pogba pretty.
I had good information on him around 2018-19, somewhere around United were seriously pursuing
Yeah.
him heavily.
Yeah, and he would have been a good replacement for Pogba. He has a lot of similar traits in some ways. He's a big individual, big player. I would have liked to see him. He never really got a move. He never got that move to somewhere else, and it's just that he's an interesting player. I would have really liked to see play for United. I think he could have done a lot. He could have been he could have been fun to watch, but it's really interesting because there are a lot of times where United have made moves for players like that somehow just doesn't ever really get reported on concretely, that they've actually like made an offer, made a move for a player, and goes under the radar. And so don't be surprised, I would say, with Ineos, that we might be see a little bit more of that, similar to the Barada appointment, where
Mhm.
something just comes out of nowhere, including the director. There's people, there's names, there's people may not be thinking of. There's guys like, Rui Braz, the Benfica director, who's apparently going to has going somewhere at the end of the season he's a director in Portugal, and who knows? There's probably a lot of names that could come out of the blue in terms of these positions and things like that go
Well,
under the radar.
you see the Bilal Alcaraz thing, so that has Man City written all over it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So if you look at one of the first things that Peter Kenyon did when he needed to put him on garden leave, goes to Chelsea, is he hijacked the Aaron Robin
yeah.
move, right?
Right.
And so there'll be a lot of that where City have an exceptional wealth of knowledge on exceptional young players at that level all across the world, where now you're going to see United being linked more and more because you're going to have to be far more intelligent with how they buy. So I think that signings like that, they'll have a mix between players with Premier League experience, and that's pretty much what Ratcliffe was doing at Nice. Was
Yes.
experienced players mixed with young players. I think that with United, you're going to see they'll be much more active in the South American market. The likes of the Echeverries, United will be much more active on that, with having the advantage of the multi-club model with France and Lausanne. And I think
Yeah.
that these are the types of things we will see more and more of. So looking forward to seeing how that develops. Anything else before we go, mate?
No, I think that's it for now. We're obviously going to see what happens, in the next few days. We'll see what the outcome of some of the Rashford stuff is and how it leads into the Wolves games. And I think there's a vote with regards to this whole process, which is happening start of next week, Monday, right? A week from today. So, I think shortly following that, it's expected that we will have the Premier League ratification. I don't think it can be ratified until it's approved in the New York Stock Exchange. Otherwise, it wouldn't really be an official deal at that point in time. So I think we'll see that pretty soon following that. And then, I think there'll be quite a bit more noise and things to talk about at that time once, from a more official standpoint, Ineos can get their hands in on things.
I don't think we'll have a quiet week between now and the foreseeable future at Manchester
I
United.
don't think so.
There's something other we meant to touch on that you mentioned it on this podcast last week was United did let go one of their physios that
Yes.
you had touched on that got confirmed a couple of days
And I have a
later.
name of a new one, but I'm still
Bang
waiting
on
for
the
an
money
answer.
again, Mr. TS.
What's that?
Bang on the money again with your inside
Yeah,
info.
yeah.
That bug you placed in Manchester United.
No, don't say that. They got
Oh,
hacked some years
sorry.
ago. I gotta be.
Sorry. What's the other? No. It's once again, you were on the money, my friend.
Yep.
You can see that United making major changes. What I would be interested to hear on that is that I would assume that met with Eric Ten Hag's approval, that he was consulted on that. I'm sure it was in Ten Hag's interest to not blame his own methods. I'm not saying it is his methods, but it's interesting. I would be surprised if they did that without Ten Hag's approval.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say is Gary O'Driscoll's been given a big remit on changes.
Okay, so maybe it was his decision then.
Yeah, very specific.
So imagine he spoke to Ten Hag about it and the players about it.
I'm sure there's dialogue and part of his assessments of it and saying, look, yeah, this whatever reason, this is not the right guy. Let's get somebody
Mhm.
else for this job. And whatever the reason. And I think the difference is with Ineos because they cannot be given credit for making this decision. They weren't the ones who made this
Of
decision.
course.
But people being allowed to make decisions is going to be is it's a change. I mean, that is a change. People being allowed to make decisions at United, who should be allowed to make those decisions, is a change.
James, the way United have acted since pretty much Christmas Day has been
Yeah.
completely unrecognizable. The how Manchester United have ever acted in
Yes.
20 years, 18, 19 years of Glazer ownership. So clearly, Ineos are already deeply affecting the direction and the decisions that United are taking. So that's more of that to come. I don't want to see anyone lose
Yes.
their job, but
Yeah.
it is United do need to make these changes. All right, folks, we'll go ahead and leave it there. Don't forget, you can follow my friend here at Muppetiers and fantastic content outside of this podcast. If you're on the BTP side listening to this, make sure you are subscribing to his YouTube channel, to James's YouTube channel, downloading his other stuff, being part of the Discord and what have you. There's lots of other exceptional information that this man gets right and does tremendous work in making sure it's accurate. For those of you who are on the Muppetier side, if you want to listen to more of my content and you can get past my funny accent, I had a People interview on Thursday, which is quite interesting. I did speak with Andy Mitten today. It's going to be part of a series called We Are United podcast, and it's going to be comprised of different interviews of different fans all across the world that have amazing stories where Manchester United transcend cultural divides, religious divides, conflicts, and we all unify under one identity of being a Manchester United fan. There's so many incredible stories out there that aren't being told that I'm excited to tell. Not every one of these interviews is going to be with high-end people that have big prominent platforms, because United Diaspora consists of lots of different people that don't have big platforms that I want to hear from. If you have someone that you think I should be speaking to that has an incredible story related to Manchester United, please email me beyondthepitch@gmail.com and let me know. So I will also have this man on at some point to talk about his love of Manchester United and how it evolved. So thanks to all of you for all your support, and don't forget to support our fanzines, folks, because they are for us, written by fans for fans, and the content is exceptional. So all right, man, take it easy, James.
Yes, you too. Thank you, everybody.
See you, pal.